At the municipal surplus auction, Vera Anderson raised a paddle for lot 73 because it made everyone else uncomfortable. A hand-sized polyhedral book core that had been misclassified as decorative tech and tossed into the mixed bin with cracked terminals and obsolete scanners. It cost pocket change, the kind of price that doesn't make the cashier look up, the kind of price that says, if it breaks, throw it away and don't write a report about it. The core was matte obsidian with luminous seam lines like underlit indexes. And to Vera, it looked less like a gem and more like an attitude, something that had decided to become useful whether or not anyone believed it. She put it in her canvas tote among library stamps, a coil of repair filament, and a thermos that smelled faintly of cinnamon. Vera's job at North Arches University Library did not usually involve auctions. It involved maps with coffee stains, students with deadlines that arrived like storms, and old terminals that blinked in a pattern only patience could decipher. She had the steady kindness of a person who believes systems can be taught to behave, and when they can't, people can learn to dance around them without tripping. Her colleagues called her Index because she could pull a citation from memory like a magician draws scarves, one color leading to the next. The core hummed when the bus crossed the maglev spur that fed the Starport, not loud, but with the confidential certainty of a page turning itself in a quiet room. Vera palmed it. The seam lines reflowed, not random, but in a cadence that felt like a table of contents, rearranging to fit a new edition. "You're a catalog that catalogs me back," she murmured, half amused, half cautious, the way one speaks to an animal at the edge of a garden. 3 days later, the Starport called the library with a favor that sounded simple enough. Could they borrow an archivist to help reconcile conflicting docking schedules between a retired cargo protocol and a newer interface that refused to read legacy tags cleanly? "It was a metadata snafu," said the coordinator, with the forced cheer of someone holding a mop while the ceiling still drips. Vera's supervisor sent her because she had a talent for coaxing bridge systems to shake hands instead of sulk. The Starport's docking array had been upgraded piecemeal, the way public infrastructure often is when there's budget. This part, when there's noise, that part, and the result was a polite civil war fought in time slots. Checksum arguments and silently rejected handshakes. In the operations gallery, Glass looked down on a galaxy of blinking indicators. Ships queued like commas in a sentence, too long for its grammar. Vira met the liaison, Kith Arel, a compact being with iridescent carapace plates and a voice that clipped every third word like a metronome. Kith carried a satchel, banded with color-coded loops, 3 for priority, 5 for safety, 1 black for do not speak unless spoken to. The loops trembled. "We require order," Kith said, the words landing like numbered list items. "Legacy interface fails. New interface ignores. Pilots become angry. Please assist." "Happy to help," Vera answered. "But first, coffee, or the closest approximation your species tolerates." Kith's loops twitched again, and a faint whistle escaped their mouthparts, like steam from a kettle. "Anxiety," Vera guessed, remembering a pamphlet the university's interspecies office circulated. For Kith's clade, public-facing roles were assigned early to those who could keep lists, and sometimes the lists began to keep them instead. She held the book core up. "Mind if I try a thing? It's a catalog tool, sort of." Kith's eyes faceted. Storm gray reflected the core's seams. "Unauthorized devices contravene protocol," they said, then added, softer, "but we are out of time." Urgency had a clock. A bulk freighter called Last Daughter of Thomas waited on a decaying orbital, its life support budgeted to the hour. Somewhere on that ship, a family counted breaths against schedule slippage, and Vera felt the tug in her chest that had nothing to do with job descriptions. They stood before the wall, where legacy tags scrolled like stubborn ancestors. The new interface, the sleek pane branded with a vendor sigil in smug silver, rejected half the old forms with a neon error that translated as, "Your accent offends me." Vera set the core on the console. The seam lines lit, then settled into a pulse. "Okay," she said to Kith, "let's explain this so the machines can hear us. Dimensional frequency is the rate space bends under signal load. The old tags bend slow. The new pane assumes fast bends only. We can teach it to listen for both tempos." "How?" Kith said, no question mark in their cadence, only a slot where a method should go. Vera smiled. The small kind, the one that says, "There is a protocol, and we will find it together." She opened a maintenance viewport. Not hacking, just the polite kind of knocking a librarian does on a locked cabinet after finding. The key taped under the shelf. The core projected a lattice of index marks across the pane, mapping error codes to grammar gaps, like footnotes appearing beside a difficult paragraph. "Step 1, Vera said. "Don't translate yet, just listen. Record the old tag's handshakes at native tempo." Kith's loops steadied as they worked. Vera's voice was even instructional, like a story time, where the book teaches the room to breathe together. "Step 2, introduce a buffer. Think of it as a pause between dialects. Machines can be polite if you give them a ritual," she said. The pane's smug silver softened to a working gray. "Step 3, mirror back confirmations at both speeds. Slow, slow, fast, fast, then a bridge. Slow, then fast. Don't guess. Echo." The cue thinned in the display. A small shuttle docked, then a tug, then 2 couriers that had been circling like anxious birds. "You make chaos speak grammar," Kith breathed, the metronome of their voice loosening into something almost like a laugh. Vera touched the core. "It's just cataloging. We teach differences to sit in the same drawer without fighting. Books do it all the time. People can, too," she said. Behind them, a supervisor in a crisp jacket approached, the kind of supervisor who pronounced vendor names like prayers, their eyes fixed on the core. "That device is not authorized on this network," they said, every syllable polished to a point. The pane, now re-handshaking in 2 tempos, reflected the supervisor's face sliced into facets by the index lattice. Vera kept her tone mild. "We're logging every step. When we're done, this will be a documented process. You won't need this device. You'll have a protocol." "Protocols," the supervisor echoed, skeptical. But the queue was shrinking, and the last daughter of Thomas had just been assigned a berth with a life support handshake tagged. Priority family, and some arguments can't stand upright in that kind of weather. Kith glanced at Vera. "Step 4? They asked. "Step 4, Vera said. "Teach it to apologize when it misunderstands. Machines don't feel shame, but users do. A good interface says, 'I didn't catch that. Try again this way.'" The pane blinked a prompt that translated across 3 dialects, including the legacy's slow bend cadence. The wall of stubborn ancestors began to read as relatives. Vera documented every adjustment, as if writing a recipe someone frightened might actually try. Ingredients, sequence, expected smells and sounds. What done looks like when one doesn't trust one's instincts yet. Kith mirrored the notes in redundant format, spoken, typed, color looped, until their satchel looked less like a warning system and more like a tapestry of understanding. The supervisor hovered, the way a storm hovers on a horizon, undecided whether to commit, calculating public relations against failure windows that didn't care about press releases. "Let's make the protocol human-readable first," Vera said, and then corrected herself with a grin. "Species-readable, plain language headers, and the technical annex for those who want the math." She anchored the steps with gentle metaphors, a buffer as a pause for breath, a handshake as a bow at 2 tempos, a checksum as a librarian's "this belongs here" stamp. When she defined dimensional frequency, again, rate space bends under signal load, she added a margin note, like a shelf sagging under heavy books. "Add a bracket before it warps." Kith blinked slowly, the iridescence in their plates resolving into calmer hues. "When you explain thus, the panic reduces," they said, meter loosening further. Vera nodded. "Interfaces aren't just between machines, they're between expectations." She glanced at the queue. The last daughter of Thomas crept inward on a path that glowed priority amber, a heartbeat of propulsion matching the console's newfound dual-tempo rhythm. Somewhere in its habitation ring, a father counted power minutes on his wrist, a daughter tucked into a sling to keep her inner ear from sparking nausea in low thrust, a family quietly wagering their future on strangers doing careful work in the right order. The book core pulsed, then rearranged its seam lines, casting a shadow like a moving index across Vera's hands. It wasn't magic, just an instrument built to listen for structure and noise, but it felt like standing next to someone who hears the harmony under a crowded room and hums the missing note until the song finds itself. She placed 2 fingertips on its surface, We'll turn this into a process any tech on any shift can run without a gadget, she murmured. Kith's antennae dipped in what Vera had learned was their people's version of a nod. A ritual shared, repeatable, they replied. The supervisor cleared their throat. Liability notes? They asked. The syllables clipped, but less like knives now, more like office scissors. Vera gestured to the draft, a short preamble about mixed standard environments, a list of supported legacy tag families, a caution about false positives, and how the apology prompt should ever so slightly over-explain rather than risk shaming an already stressed pilot. Add a clock to the prompt, Vera said to Kith. Not a countdown, a reassurance. Your life support window has been noted. Priority handling engaged. Kith typed, the loops on their satchel settling, black loop untouched. A hush rolled through operations as the last daughter of Thomas kissed the berth and the handshake finished without stumbling. Precision isn't the opposite of kindness, Vera thought. Sometimes it's how kindness keeps its promise. A cheer didn't break. This wasn't that kind of room, but shoulders dropped, and someone let out a laugh that sounded like a valve opening after a stuck morning. The supervisor looked at the core like a cat looks at a laser pointer, suspicious of being made to chase, begrudgingly glad the red dot found mice. Now for the stubborn edge cases, Vera said. We need to catch a misreported tag that claims to be new but speaks old, and one that's truly corrupted. 2 branches, 2 remedies. She built tests. Kith watched, then began suggesting their own, the metronome of their speech flickering into a cadence that carried small surprises, like syncopation. Together, they mapped a decision tree that would fit on a single page. If slow handshake succeeds, proceed. If not, initiate bridge. If bridge fails, prompt apology and manual handoff. Log each path in clear text with timestamps, not just codes. People will copy this, Kith said softly, almost to themselves. Vera shrugged. Good. That's the point. She added a footer. Credits. Operations team beta tested this protocol. Use and adapt freely. Send improvements back to the library repository open access. The supervisor's mouth twitched at open. Our vendor will object, they said. Vendors object all the time, Vera replied, gentle and unafraid. But families don't have time for proprietary grudges. We'll document cleanly. If the vendor can do better, they can do it in public, with gratitude. An alert pinged soft, not panicked. A courier from the artisan quarter needed a berth near the commercial gallery. Their cargo, musical instruments that warped under long spins, a small orchestra's future rattling in cases. Let's see how our apology prompt sings, Vera said. It sang well. The interface admitted confusion, offered the slower dialect, then matched tempos like a duet. The courier slid in, and a trio of teenagers on the gallery's mezzanine, who'd been watching the dance between light panels whooped before remembering silence, was the default in rooms where large things meet small target rectangles without touching edges. By mid-shift, the queue wasn't just shorter, it was calmer. The wall of ancestor tags no longer looked like a grudge. It looked like a genealogy. Vera closed the maintenance viewport. The device never touched your core systems, she said to the supervisor. It only taught us to listen, then we wrote what we heard. The supervisor's crispness softened into something like thoughtfulness. You will leave a copy, they said, more like a request than an order. 2, Vera said. 1 here, 1 at the university. Public mirror. Kith tilted their head. Will you return tomorrow? They asked. If you want a training, Vera replied. Story time for interfaces and the people who care for them. Kith's mouthparts trembled in what Vera now recognized as amusement. We will bring tea, they said. Vera slipped the book core back into her tote. It dimmed. Content the way a tool is when the work around it becomes simple enough to not need it. In the glass beyond, traffic flowed like sentences that had found their verbs. Outside the operations gallery, the commercial wings spilled light. A family walked past, holding hands in the odd Starport way fingertips, linked to keep grip light under lower gravity. The smallest turned to look at Vera's canvas tote, eyes wide. Is that a book? The child asked, wonder unbothered by the fact that the book had more edges than a bedtime story. It helps us make better shelves, Vera said. The child nodded as if this solved a riddle adults liked to complicate. Behind her, A message blinked on a side console vendor representative arriving at midnight to review unauthorized remediation. Midnight has a way of making people brave or foolish. Vera preferred to make it useful. She looked at the clock, then at Kith. Training at 2200? She asked. We'll make sure the room is full when midnight comes calling. Kith's loops settled into a neat, satisfied arrangement. A protocol, they said, savoring the syllables. And a crowd. By 2200, Vera had converted a briefing room into a classroom that didn't feel like a punishment. Chairs faced in a gentle arc instead of a military grid. The lights were warm, not interrogative, and the display panels showed the protocol in big. Forgiving text first, technical annexes tucked behind a tab for those who loved footnotes as much as she did. Kith arrived early, loops orderly, a tray balanced in careful hands. Their tea smelled like pepper and late rain on metal. Operations techs filtered in night shift, day shift hanging over for curiosity. A few custodial staff who always learn systems because they're the ones healing them at 3 in the morning when everyone else sleeps. Welcome to cross-dialect handshakes, Vera began. Voice steady, not grand. Plain language first. Then we'll practice 3 failure modes and the apology prompt. By midnight, anyone here should be able to run the protocol end-to-end without external devices. She placed the book core on the table like a museum piece you can touch if you promise not to pretend you're not touching it. This helped us listen for structure in noise. But the process we wrote is yours, and it lives in text, not in this. A doc tech with oil under their nails raised a hand. What's dimensional frequency again? They asked, looking faintly guilty for asking out loud. Rate space bends under signal load, Vera said, smiling. Think of a shelf sagging with heavy books. Old tags sag more. New panes assume shelves that don't. Our buffer is the bracket you installed before the sag becomes a break. The room breathed out, the way people do when a complicated thing becomes a thing they can picture without flinching. Kith stepped forward. We will practice like dance, they said, eyes bright. Slow, slow, fast, fast, then bridge. Slow, then fast. Echo, do not guess. Speak your apology clearly. Vera drove the simulator. The display showed a stubborn legacy tag trying to handshake with a pain that refused to hear its vowels. First pass. Just listen, Vera narrated. No translation. Record. Show respect to the speaker before you ask them to change. The simulator captured the waveform, labeled it with time, tagged it with a human-readable comment. Legacy cadence consistent. Prepare buffer. They ran through failure mode 2, a new tag that lied about its age. Code weathered by long trips and too many patch jobs. The apology prompt appeared. I didn't catch that. Try this way. Options. Slow cadence, manual handoff, call for assistance. A custodial worker badge reading Kai pointed. That line, Kai said, matters at 3 a.m. When the machine pretends it knows but doesn't, people feel stupid. This way, the system takes the blame. Vera nodded. Interfaces sit between expectations. They can cushion or bruise. By 2330, muscle memory began to bloom. Text could run the sequence without checking notes, and the notes themselves had grown margin comments. Better examples, translations into the local cargo guild slang, so a foreman wouldn't feel talked down to by a screen. Vera had a license line at the top. Open protocol use, adapt, credit. A QR for the university repository winked in the corner like a polite guest. Kith leaned in. Vendor will arrive soon, they said softly. We will show, not argue. The door hissed at 2358. 2 people entered with the serenity of those paid to never sweat. Tailored jackets, discreet slate badges with the vendor's silver sigil. Between them, a case the size of a carry-on and the attitude of a lawsuit. We understand there has been an unauthorized remediation, said the taller one, each consonant buffed to a sheen. Vera stood, palms open. There has been a documented, repeatable procedure authored by your users to bridge legacy and new tag cadences in a mixed standard environment, she said. You're welcome to observe the training and review the public draft. Unauthorized devices were interfaced with our pain, the shorter one said, eyes on the book core, as if it were a stain. No core systems were altered, Vera replied. Listening isn't intrusion. Kith stepped to her side, loops aligned in a neat column. Q stabilized. Families benefited. We can demonstrate now. The vendor reps conferred in a whisper, calibrated to convey condescension without risk of being quoted. Proceed, the taller said at last. Vera gestured to Kith. Lead, she said. The room watched Kith run the protocol from memory. Slow, slow, fast, fast, bridge. Apology when needed. Manual handoff for the one true corruption case. The simulator showed throughput gains, error reductions, and quietly. In a corner metric pilot's satisfaction upticks in plain words, not just charts. The shorter rep set the carry-on on the table, clicked it open, and revealed a glossy module. Our proprietary compatibility harmonizer, they announced. It achieves similar outcomes under licensed conditions. Vera looked at the module the way a gardener looks at an expensive plastic flower. Demonstrate, she said simply. They tried. The harmonizer handled the easy cases, stumbled on the lying new tag, and failed the apology prompt because, of course, it didn't have one. A murmur rose night shift, custodial, junior techs, a security guard, leaning in the doorway, not a mob. A crowd that had learned something together and recognized when someone else hadn't. The taller rep smiled thinly. With the proper firmware, they began. With the proper humility, Kai said from the back. Not unkind, just done being talked through. Vera didn't raise her voice. Here's what we propose, she said. We keep the protocol public. You publish your improvements in the same repository. Credits for all. No fees for safety-critical use. That way, the next family doesn't wait on a license key at midnight. Silence performed its delicate work. The vendor reps assessed the room. Techs who could run the protocol without notes. A liaison whose loops were no longer trembling. A librarian with a rock in a tote who had somehow turned an emergency into a class. The taller rep's smile adjusted from litigation to stakeholder engagement. We can consider a pilot, they said. Not a pilot, Vera answered, patient. A publication. Version 1.0. Starport Dual Tempo Docking Protocol. She slid a draft title page across the table. It already had co-authors listed. Operations Team North Arches. Kitharel, Vera Anderson. The shorter rep's eyes flicked to the open license line and then to the QR. You can't compel our IP, they said. We're not touching your IP, Vera said. We're documenting user practice. If your pain can do better, you'll earn gratitude and market share by contributing improvements that don't lock out a captain. With 20 minutes of life support left, Kith added, voice even. This room remembers breath counts. The case on the table looked suddenly heavy. The shorter rep closed it with a soft, expensive click. Our legal will need to review, they said. Of course, Vera said. In the meantime, we'll keep using the protocol. Publicly, we will train every shift. We will log every success and failure in clear text. You will be able to see the same reality we do. Run more and more, a night shift pilot said from the door, flight suit creased but eyes bright. I brought a courier that's been arguing with your pain for a month. They plugged in a live feed operations, had eyes on the berth, safeguards in place. The courier's tag presented as new, wobbled like a bad memory, then tried to sing fast in a voice that wanted to be slow. Vera nodded to Kith. Apology first, she said, then mirror, then bridge. It worked not because the machine was clever, but because the people had agreed on a way to be careful together. The pilot exhaled. Buy whoever wrote that prompt a drink, they said. Kith glanced at Vera. Tea, they said, and the room laughed. A release that didn't break the night, just loosened it. The taller rep watched the metrics update. Something changed behind their eyes. The small calculation in which brand risk becomes brand opportunity. We will convene a cross-functional, they said, as if the phrase could summon sincerity. Convenings are welcome, Vera replied. Protocols are better. The session turned into a clinic. Techs rotated through the simulator, then the live console under supervision. Kai showed a trick for spotting corrupted tags by their hesitation at the third echo. A junior analyst translated a crucial sentence into the Freighter Guild's argot so it wouldn't sound like scolding. Vera added those to the annex, crediting names, not just roles, because a protocol with authors makes a community feel like owners, not subjects. At 037, an alert. A ferry from the residential ring stalled in a queue snarl caused by a cargo bay door error cascading into berth assignments. Not a disaster. A tangle. The new protocol let ops untie it faster because the apology prompts kept pilots calm, and the dual tempo. Echoes reduced reattempt thrash. On the gallery above, the trio of teenagers watched again. One of them filming quietly for a school project on infrastructure as everyday heroism. Vera didn't mind. Stories teach tools to survive beyond the room. The vendor reps retreated to a corner to draft an email to legal that would sound cooperative without conceding anything irreversible. Kith stood with them at a respectful distance, loops arranged in observing order. "If you publish first," they whispered to Vera later, "they cannot bury." Vera nodded. "We'll push by morning." Doi, timestamp, the works. She typed the final plain language statement. This protocol exists because mixed standard systems are the norm, not the exception. It turns an enigma into a sequence that any trained tech can run. Use it, teach it, modify it, send back what you learn. At 1:05, the day shift supervisor, the one whose jacket had been crisp and eyes narrow, returned in different clothes. The kind people wear when they come back because they couldn't sleep. They looked at the live board, at the queue that moved without bickering, at a small indicator labeled Pilot Sat that glowed a humble green. "I was wrong to fixate on the device," they said, not loudly, but into the record. "What matters is the process." Vera met their gaze. "Thank you for saying that into the log," she answered. Kith lifted their tea. "To ritual," they said. The room echoed, "To ritual," in 10 accents, some human, some not, all equally tired and a little proud. The book core rested in Vera's tote, unneeded but not unwelcome, like a friend who knows when to be quiet. Outside, the commercial gallery had gone to sleep, shutters down like eyelids. In the institutional wing, the library's night crew shelved returns in the hum of lights that never fully turn off. And in the logistics vein that fed the Starport, 100 small vessels made their slow way to and from places that felt less lonely when systems apologized properly and kept their promises in the right order. At 1:30, Vera hit publish. The protocol went live on the university's repository, mirrored to the Starport's public board, a modest announcement that did not brag, only told the truth about work done together. The vendor reps received the link and a copy of the log. "We will respond," they wrote, which could mean many things, but would not mean silence. Vera leaned back, shoulders sore in the good way, and thought about the small child who'd asked if the core was a book. It was, in the way that matters. It taught better shelves. The morning after publication, the university library smelled like dust, warmed by first light and the faint citrus of cleaning solution that always settled after the night crew's quiet choreography. Vera arrived early, not out of anxiety, but because the building felt like a large mind waking up. And librarians are the sort who like to greet minds before the day's noise distracts them from their better questions. The book core rested in her tote, humming the way an index hums when a new subject heading has just been accepted into the catalog, and the cross-references are starting to braid themselves into usefulness. Kitharel pinged her from the Starport. Their message was compact and careful. Throughput increased 17%. Error rates down. Pilots sent 3 thank you notes, 2 with emojis we are learning to interpret. Vendor non-committal. Team morale elevated. Request: bring book core to library observe in home habitat. The term made Vera smile. Home habitat for a tool is any room where someone wants to understand it more than they want to own it. She set the core on a table beneath a skylight. In the library's morning hush, its scene lines brightened, then reflowed, sketching faint geometries across the table's wood. If last night the core had mapped error codes to grammar gaps, this morning it seemed to map quiet to intention. Students drifted in with the gentleness of people, hoping not to scare away their own focus. A pair of first years passed the table, whispering. One gestured at the core with the reverence usually reserved for art or superstition. Vera didn't treat it as either. She pulled up a plain text editor and opened the live protocol document. Comments had arrived overnight from 3 starports in the region, 2 maintenance crews, and a captain who had once sworn that if he had to argue with one more smug pain, he'd retire to farm algae somewhere no one could send him updates. Notes ranged from small fixes, your buffer timing should note variance under high RF traffic, to touching. The apology prompt prevented an argument with an exhausted mother ferrying twins. Thank you for remembering dignity. She added each improvement, crediting contributors by name where permitted, by role where safety demanded anonymity. Kith arrived at the library entrance like a well-organized storm in a polite coat. The staff at the front desk straightened, then relaxed as Vera waved them through. Kith stood before the core and executed a bow with 2 tempos, a gesture they had adopted from the protocol training in a moment that made everyone in the room laugh softly with recognition. This dash is dash your dash book room, Kith observed, eyes tracing the stacks with what Vera recognized as hunger. It is, Vera said, and you're welcome in it. They found a table by the intersystem section, where atlases shifted from stellar charts to commuter maps with the same promise. If a road is drawn, a mind can travel it. We dash have dash received dash communication dash from vendor, Kith said, loops settling into their brief arrangement. They propose closed collaboration NDA, limited implementation, brand first language. Their tone didn't sharpen. It didn't need to. The words brand first already carried their own irony. Vera took a sip from her thermos. We'll stay kind and public, she said. Invite them to contribute under the same license. If they bring a good idea, the community will see it and adopt it. If they try to gatekeep, the community will see that too. Kith's antennae dipped. Crowd turn, they murmured, using the term she'd taught last night. The moment a community recognizes its own power to choose the better process and stands quietly between good work and those who would fence it. A student approached, awkward but determined. Are you the librarian who published the docking protocol? They asked. Vera nodded. The student placed a small box on the table. Inside lay a mess of tagged cables, an old handheld interface, and a note. My grandfather's from the first Ring expansion. He used this to teach me patience. Maybe it can teach your core something. Vera's chest warmed. It already has, she said. It taught it that archives are made of gifts. They used the handheld to feed the core legacy signal, patterns that predated even the tags they'd encountered last night. The core patient cautious mapped them without touching the building's networks. The way a careful visitor observes rituals without presuming membership. On Vera's screen, a new index began. Very old tags, rarely seen, but still traveling. She added a line. If a system carries people, it inherits their history. Don't disrespect an elder whose vowels are slower than fashion. Near noon, the Starport supervisor arrived at the library in civilian clothes, hands in pockets, jaw unclenched. I came to apologize, they said without ceremony. I treated your process like a threat because it didn't arrive with an invoice. Vera gestured to a chair. Apology accepted. Sit. Help us write the section on supervisory rollouts. They did. Together, they authored guidelines for deploying the protocol without disruption, including never make a shift feel stupid for doing yesterday's best in today's room. Always staff trainings with people who can crack a joke without cracking confidence. Measure success in breaths eased, not just metrics. At 14 o'clock, a message from the commercial gallery's artisan quarter. Tomorrow, a music festival would move instruments, lighting rigs, and fragile acoustic modules through the port. Could the team ensure the dual tempo protocol handled the odd manifests without misclassifying them as hazardous? Vera replied with a plan, a test window at dawn, a musician present to describe what fragile means for a cello that hates spin, a craftsperson to explain why a certain crate sounds wrong when jostled. Kith added, deadpan but sincere, we dash will dash bring dash tea. As the afternoon softened, the book core dimmed, its scenes returning to a steady glow like a lantern that knows twilight from night. Vera packed it in her tote. Back to the Starport? Kith asked. Back to the community, Vera corrected gently. The Starport is part of it. So is this library. So is a workshop where someone sands a violin bridge until it sings. Protocols live where people are patient together. They walked out under the skylight. The city's air carried the promise of evening. Street vendors warming spices, a tram bell, the far thrum of ships arriving at a place that had learned overnight to bow at 2 tempos without losing face. Kith's loops settled into a pattern Vera hadn't seen. Content in progress. She liked that phrase. Content is not an end. It's a state one permits, while keeping a hand on the next page. Night brought them back to the port, not because of emergency, but because rituals gain strength from repetition. The operations gallery looked different after midnight, less like a control room, more like a lighthouse. The queue flowed with a quiet intelligence. Pilots greeted the apology, prompt the way weary travelers greet familiar clerk relief in recognizing a face that won't make trouble worse by pretending it doesn't exist. The vendor representatives returned, this time with a third colleague whose badge did not mention legal or sales. Their posture had a different grammar, hands that had touched tools, eyes that measured problems by the thickness of their callus. "I'm Sira from Field Engineering," they said without preamble. "I read your protocol. It's good. We can make our pain play nicer without breaking brand promises." I brought a patch. The taller and shorter reps looked as if a script had been misplaced. Vera inclined her head. "Welcome," she said. "Patches are better than postures." Sira connected a test pane in an isolated rig. "We added a dynamic buffer that adapts to measured cadence instead of assuming fast only as truth," they explained. "We also borrowed your apology prompt language with attribution if you accept our pull request." Vera smiled. "Accepted. Pending community review. Credit rolls downhill to the people who taught us the need." She gestured at Kai and the junior analyst from last night. Sira nodded, took notes, and didn't pretend that authorship belonged to the shiniest logo in the room. They ran the tests. The pain no longer bristled at elderly vowels. It mirrored, it bridged, and when it failed, it said so without turning blame into a reflex. Kith watched, loops arranged in their evaluating good faith order. "This will save breaths," they said softly. Sira's face flickered relief first, and a complicated thought. "Our product roadmaps rarely measure breaths," they admitted. "We measure units shipped, subscriptions renewed." Vera didn't scold. "Breaths are a better KPI," she said. "They keep families inside numbers." As they worked, a minor crisis tested the room's new habits. A tug's auxiliary power dipped during approach, turning its tag into a stutter. The old pane would have treated the stutter as insolence. The patched pane, following the protocol, treated it as a distress accent. The apology prompt guided a manual handoff, and the tug nestled into a berth like a tired worker finding a chair that doesn't scrape. The pilot's voice crackled in. "Tell the librarian I owe her a story." Vera grinned. "Libraries accept stories as payment," she said to the room. Kith's laugh sounded like a spoon striking a kettle, bright, precise, uncomplicated joy. The vendor's taller rep attempted to reclaim the narrative. "We are pleased to announce a strategic collaboration," they began, voice packaging the night into press release syntax. Vera raised a hand, not to silence, but to redirect. "Announce, yes," she said, "but name the community, name the open repository, name the people whose notes taught your pain to bow. If you say strategic without saying shared, the crowd will turn." The phrase hung, gentle but non-negotiable. Sira covered a smile with a cough. "We'll draft something honest," they said. "I'll sign it." A small delegation arrived from the artisan quarter, 2 musicians and a craftsperson with hands that carried the grain of wood. They'd come to walk through tomorrow's festival logistics. "Our instruments don't like spin and hard stops," the cellist said. "They sulk when hurried." Vera nodded as if the cello were in the room and listening for respect. "We'll give you a dawn test window," she said. "We'll annotate crates as if they're elderly relatives, with patience." Kith added the details into the schedule, loops aligning into execution order. They ran a rehearsal. The console translated manifests into human-readable hints. "This crate complains when tilted. Pause 3 seconds before the second transfer. Steam is a yes. Vibration is a no." The apology prompt adjusted its language to treat art with the same dignity as air recyclers. A junior tech teared up and pretended it was from lack of sleep. No one called attention to it. Respect isn't loud. Around 2:40, a courier from a distant logistics hub pinged with an unusual request. Their tag used a dialect that hadn't traveled this way in a decade. Vera retrieved the new annex they'd compiled that afternoon. "Very old tags," she told the room. "We listen first. We let elders tell us how they like to be greeted." The pain listened. The pain learned. The pain didn't brag. The pain did its job, which is the highest praise a tool can earn. Sira leaned on the console, watching the metrics smooth into a picture of a system that had rediscovered its vocation. "Why did you buy that core?" they asked, nodding at the tote. Vera thought of the auction. The pocket change bid, the way everyone had looked away because the object was uncomfortable and therefore cheap, because it was misfiled, she said. And misfiled things often know a way through a mess that correctly labeled things forgot. Sira considered that, then said quietly, "We misfile people like that, too." Vera's reply was gentle. "Then we should fix the catalog by 3:10. The room had the soft glow of competence earned by showing up twice in the same day and choosing care both times. The supervisor, now fully converted to the religion of process, signed an internal memo. Protocol adopted, public mirror maintained, vendor contributions welcome but not required. Kith's loops relaxed into rest, a pattern Vera vowed to learn for her own nervous system. The book core did not shine. It didn't need to. The work around it had become legible without it, which was, from the beginning, the point. They wrapped with a small ritual. Each person who had contributed an idea wrote it on a card and pinned it to a board labeled "Lessons We Won't Let Be Stolen." The cards read like a song: "Apologize early," "Echo," "Don't guess," "Credits matter," "Breath is a metric," "Shelves before swagger." A board looked like a library's bulletin at the end of a good week, messy, honest, hopeful. Dawn teased the edges of the commercial gallery. In a few hours, a child would point at a crate and ask a question that would make 3 adults cry because it would be the right one at the right time. Asked with the kind of love that doesn't embarrass itself by pretending it's math. Vera packed the tote, nodded to Sira, clasped Kith's forearm in the universal gesture, for we're not done, but we did well. The Starport breathed. The city listened, and somewhere out in approach, a ship whispered in a slow accent that would be heard. By dawn, the operations gallery had a different kind of hum, the anticipatory one that precedes coordinated art. The Artisan Quarters Festival convoy cued at approach. Instrument crates, lighting arrays, fragile acoustics, and a few items that defied labels without defying physics. Vera arrived with Kith and Sira, thermos in hand, the book core resting like a quiet opinion in her tote. The dual-tempo protocol sat on the console like a well-thumbed manual, notes accreted in the margins from hands that had not asked permission to be useful. Plain language headers, then the math, Vera said, almost a greeting. The console obligingly showed both, a big font checklist, and beneath it, annexes with buffer timings and cadence diagnostics. The apology prompt had a new variant for art cargo. "If you are temperamental, we will not take it personally. Try this slower cadence. We will meet you there." A junior tech had written the line. It sounded like a love letter that remembered to put the kettle on. First through the gate was a crate of cellos. The manifest carried a note from the luthier: "Do not tilt past 10 degrees. Pause 2 beats before transfer 2. Avoid micro-vibration clusters." Sira watched the sensors. "Our pain can add a musician mode overlay," they murmured. "Not a gimmick. A set of constraints that prioritizes gentleness over seconds saved." Vera nodded. "Gentleness is often the shortest path to not breaking things you can't afford to replace." Kith's loops shifted into careful now, their species ritual pattern for tasks requiring hands steadier than pride. They ran the first transfer. The apology prompt greeted a hiccup with grace. The buffer absorbed a shiver that would once have echoed into an argument between systems. In the gallery, 2 musicians watched with the attentiveness of parents at a first recital. When the crate settled, one exhaled a note that wasn't quite music, but wanted to be. Vera made a note: "Annotate apology with empathy for craft. It costs nothing. It buys trust." Next came a lighting rig with a tag that claimed to be new, but spoke in an accent that had traveled freight corridors no one bothered to standardize, because artists are supposed to improvise around systemic laziness. The pane mirrored, bridged, and when the rig stumbled again, it apologized and offered a manual handoff. The tech at the controls, Kai, executed it with the same care they used to mop a lab floor under live equipment. "I like systems that know when to call a friend," Kai said, and someone wrote that on the whiteboard because sometimes a slogan deserves to be a policy. The convoy flowed. The festival coordinator pinged with a surprise, a modular acoustic shell arriving on short notice, built by a collective that wrote manifests like poems. Vera smiled. "We'll let the shell read us too," she said. The pane listened to the tag, which announced itself with a line that, translated, meant, "I am for echo and intimacy." The apology prompt replied, "We will lower our voice." The transfer proceeded. In the gallery, a teenager filming for school captured the exchange and whispered, "They're flirting," to which an adult whispered back, "They're respecting," and the difference mattered. Mid-morning, a snag. An arriving freighter's auxiliary systems bled noise into the RF spectrum, fuzzing the cadence detection. The protocol's annex had a note for this added by a maintenance team in the night. High RF traffic? Add 1.5 beats to buffer. Increase echo clarity. Log interference source for facilities follow-up. Sira toggled the pane's new adaptive buffer. Kith annotated the log for facilities with the calm of someone who understands that maintenance is not an apology. It's a promise kept on a schedule. The vendor's taller rep arrived, carrying a draft press statement that, to their credit, used the words community, open, and credit without choking. Sira had edited it, and the edits read like an adult had been in the room when the adjectives were chosen. "We propose a joint demonstration at noon," the rep said. "We will acknowledge the repository and the authors." Vara glanced at Kith, who adjusted a loop to wary hopeful. "Demonstrations are useful when they teach," Vara replied. "We'll do it as a training with Q&A. People should leave able to run the protocol, not just clap for it." At 11:45, the operations gallery filled. Pilots on break, custodial, cargo guild reps, a few officials who wore suits like armor. The demonstration began not with fanfare, but with a story. The last daughter of Thomas docking on a clock that counted breaths. Stories make protocols sticky. Then they ran a live case, a legacy tug with a stutter, a musician's crate that hates tilt, a courier with a very old dialect. The pain mirrored, apologized, bridged, and when needed, yielded to hands. Throughput didn't suffer. Tempers didn't either. The crowd asked good questions. How does the apology prompt translate to species that dislike admitting error? Answer: you tailor tone, not truth. You say, "We will adjust," which carries dignity without denial. What about sabotage? Could someone weaponize the apology to jam lanes? Answer: the annex covers rate limiting. Courtesy does not abdicate safety. Can pilots see the buffer? Answer: yes. Transparency reduces conspiracy theories when delays occur. At noon, the taller rep read the statement. It credited the team in repository. It did not declare ownership. It invited contributions. The room did not cheer. It accepted. In infrastructure, acceptance is louder than applause because it reverberates through 1,000 small acts of compliance that turn into culture. Vera watched faces soften into willingness. Kith stood a little taller. Sira looked like someone who had successfully smuggled ethics into a deliverable. After the session, the supervisor approached Vera with a question that sounded like a confession. "What happens when we aren't here?" they asked, glancing at the crowd dispersing back to tasks. "When the festival ends, when the vendor moves on, when the next crisis is a different shape." Vera tapped the protocol on the console. "This stays. The habit stays. The apology stays. And if we forget, the repository's history embarrasses us back to our better selves." The afternoon tested their composure with a different kind of complexity, not technical, but social. A small delegation from a neighboring port arrived, invited by the open publication and pulled by rumor. Their liaison, a dignitary with an impeccable crest and a tendency to speak in declaratives, studied the console and the training materials with a warmth just below freezing. "Your openness is interesting," they said, which dignitaries deploy when they mean alarming but popular. Vera offered tea. "It helps," she said, and set out cups like a ritual that refuses to be weaponized. "You can implement the protocol today. The repository is mirrored. If you improve it, your name goes in the log. If you break something, your cautionary tale does too. Either way, the next person learns faster." The dignitary countered with the usual austerity hymn. "Standards must be guarded. Quality must be licensed. Chaos must be tamed." Kith answered before Vera could. "We tamed chaos by listening," they said, each hyphen a small, polite act of defiance. "We did not license breath." The dignitaries eyed young, eyes bright with the terror of wanting to do right under a mentor who measures duty and frowns leaned forward. "What if our vendor refuses?" they whispered. Sira shrugged with empathy. "Teach the protocol anyway. Invite them in. Put their name on contributions they actually make, not on air." The aide nodded. A small rebellion learning its first step. A hiccup landed in the queue. 2 ships claimed the same priority code. One legitimately, One because a scheduler upstream had rubber-stamped a request to quiet a loud captain. The pane couldn't adjudicate fairness. It could only signal conflict. Here, the protocol's social annex took over. Call both pilots, acknowledge the conflict, explain the process, ask for patience, then make a transparent decision with an audible clock. Vera took the calls. She used the apology tone that says, "We are not gods, but we are trying to be fair in public." Both captains grumbled. Both complied. Trust is not the absence of grumbling. It is the willingness to grumble while doing the decent thing, because the system has earned the benefit of the doubt. Later, a mislabeled hazardous crate triggered a deeper conversation. The apology prompt took care not to apologize for catching a danger, but it did apologize for the inconvenience of the recheck. The crew opened the crate to find not danger but history, an antique reactor component destined for a museum, packed by someone who believed old things must be afraid of new words. Vera added a line to the annex. "When you find history in a box, call the library. We know how to talk to it without either condescension or awe." The dignitary watched the room adapt and did not entirely hide respect. Perhaps openness is a kind of enforcement, they mused, not to be quoted, but to be remembered. A law people carry because it was written with them, not at them. Vera didn't gloat. "Openness is an affordance," she said. "It lets competence find the shortest path to the problem. It lets decency travel faster than edict." Kith added a card to the lessons board. Decency is a protocol. Someone underlined it, not because it needed emphasis, but because hands like to help. Evening approached, and with it, the first performances in the artisan quarter. The convoy reversed direction, a choreography that would have embarrassed them yesterday, and now looked like a line dance, led by a consul that had learned to bow. The teenagers returned to film a segment called "How a Port Says Sorry," which made an older tech snort, and then admit the title worked because it didn't apologize for being earnest. Sierra received a ping from their internal channel. Legal had approved the press statement with 2 caveats that did not matter to anyone who wasn't paid to care. They looked at Vera. "I don't want to lose this," they said softly, meaning this feeling of doing the right thing where it counts. Vera's smile was tired and kind. "Then keep doing public work. It's hard to take away what people have seen themselves do." At sunset, the neighboring port's dignitary surprised everyone. They raised a cup of tea, and in a voice trained to be ceremonial, said, "To the librarians of the gates." The room didn't know whether to laugh or bow, so it did both, which is a good compromise between respect and a refusal to become a statue. Vera tucked the book core deeper into her tote. It had learned what it was supposed to teach, that a tool's highest calling is to make itself unnecessary by making people brave together. As lights came up for the evening's first concert, a final alert arrived, a ship on emergency approach, engine alarms bleeding into life support warnings. The pane flashed the dual-tempo handshake. The apology prompt switched to emergency mode. No frills, no metaphors, only the stern kindness of instructions that carry urgency without panic. The room moved as if it had practiced for this song all week. The berth opened. The handshake completed. The ship breathed with the station. In the quiet that followed, the supervisor wrote into the log, "We did not stop a war. We kept a promise. That is enough for tonight." By the second morning, the protocol had a life beyond the room that birthed it. It appeared in guild chats as a pinned message, in a maintenance memo as a checklist, and on a community board where someone had drawn a cartoon of a docking pane bowing to a cargo crate with the caption, "Echo, don't guess." The Starport's air felt different the way a house feels after someone finally fixes the door that never closed right. People moved through it with a little less bracing, a little more faith that systems would treat them like partners instead of suspects. Vera stepped into operations with Kith at her shoulder and Sierra a step behind, carrying a portable test rig that would become a traveling classroom. The book core rode in Vera's tote. Dim, content, the quiet of the tool that knows it's not the main character anymore. The supervisor met them with a printout, a list titled Rollout Plan, neighboring ports, public mirrors, training cadence. It was thorough without being fussy. Vera smiled. "Let's add a section on borrowed rooms," she said. "Any place with chairs and a screen can be a classroom. Break rooms, union halls, library corners, the back of a cafe, if they'll have us. At mid-shift, A knot formed in the queue that smelled like politics. 2 ships from rival territories arrived with overlapping claims, and behind them, a humanitarian ferry with a manifest that read like a heartbeat. The pane signaled conflict. The protocol handed the problem to the social annex. Transparency, apology, fair process. Vera opened a channel to all 3. "We'll sequence this out loud," she said. "Your claims are noted. The ferry carries medical supplies and families. It goes first. Then you, in arrival order. The log will record it. The board will display it. If a complaint must be filed, it can be filed in the light." There was grumbling. There was always grumbling. But the ferry's approach lit the console with an urgency that didn't need a speech to justify it. The pane echoed, bridged, apologized once for a jitter it did not cause, and the berth sealed like a promise. A child's voice, faint and tinny overcome, said, "Thank you," and 10 adults pretended they had dust in their eyes. Kith's loops fixed into holding steady, the pattern their people used when they chose not to cry where work still had to be done. After the ferry, Sierra ran a patch review with 2 techs from the night shift who believed they weren't computer people until the protocol let them be. "The adaptive buffer reads cadence across noisy spectra now," Sierra explained, hands moving without theatrics. "The apology prompt templates are parametric tone and length, adjust to species preferences without lying." The text nodded, unafraid to stop Sierra when words outran understanding, because this room had learned the etiquette of asking without shame. Vera annotated the repository. Patch V1.1 merged. Credits: Field Engineering, Night Shift Techs, Custodial Insight on Machines Taking Blame at 3 a.m. Training note: emphasize parametric tone dignity without denial. The commercial gallery pinned with a different request, less urgent, not less important. A pop-up market would be moving family heirlooms and working tools out to the residential ring for a heritage day. "Not fragile like instruments," the organizer wrote. "Fragile like memory." Vera added a new annex called Handling Memory. It wasn't technical. Exactly. It told operators to narrate what they were doing over comms when moving heirlooms, to invite a family member to watch from the gallery if they wished, to treat time not as a cost, but as a way of saying, "We see you." Kith read the annex and adjusted their loops into approval, a quiet checkmark humans learned to recognize after a while. By noon, the neighboring port's delegation returned with a small team of their own ops crew boots scuffed, eyes skeptical in the productive way. "We heard the story," their lead said. "We're here for the steps." Vera handed them the traveling rig. "Plain language first," she said, "then the math. You'll run 3 cases, a lying new tag, a real corruption, and a cadence you've never seen. You'll apologize twice and mean it both times." They did. The rig didn't care about jurisdiction. It cared about sequence, tone, and listening. The ops crew's skepticism turned into fluency, then into relief, because competence that can be taught is a kind of mercy. Mid-afternoon brought the hint of a storm. An executive from a distant corporate block-sharp suit, sharper gaze, arrived without an appointment, trailed by 2 aides. "We have concerns about uncontrolled protocol drift," they said, as if the word uncontrolled were a contagion. Vera gestured to the public board, where version history was visible, changes documented, credits listed. "Drift is what happens when knowledge is hoarded in silos," she replied. "This is evolution. It's documented. It's auditable. It's better than pretending a black box is a god." The executive's eyebrows arched. "You are very certain for a librarian," they said. Vera's answer was simple. Librarians are cautious for a living. Certainty, when it shows up, has a bibliography. Kith's mouthparts trembled with amusement. Sierra tried not to grin. The aides took notes, which meant the conversation had already won something. It had turned from theater to record. As evening folded into the Starport's artificial dusk, the artisan quarter sent thanks in the form of music that seeped through ducks and rails folk melodies, retuned to acoustics, tempered by careful logistics. The operations gallery did not pause to listen, but its people did. In the small way that matters, shoulders loosening, voices softening, choices made with a touch more patience. A system can be tuned by sound if the people in it decide to hear. A call came from the institutional wing. The university planned to host an open colloquium about public protocols and civic infrastructure. They wanted Vera, Kith, and Sierra to sit on a panel with skeptics from procurement and law. We'll bring our log, Vera said. And our failures, Sira added, and a patch roadmap. Kith, with gentle mischief, and tea. They would not go to argue that night. They would go to demonstrate and to narrate, because this had become their method. Mystery to protocol, protocol to community, community to culture. But the night had one more test waiting, a slow burn problem that didn't blink red, which is the most dangerous kind. A partial outage in a peripheral antenna array degraded cadence detection in one sector. The protocol's adaptive buffer handled most cases, but error rates ticked up, and pilots began to speculate in the way tired people do when uncertainty arrives without a name. Vera scanned the log. Facilities ticket filed 2 hours ago, Kith said. Technicians en route. Let's preempt the rumor, Vera said. She drafted a transparent notice. We are experiencing degraded cadence detection in Sector C due to antenna maintenance. The protocol is compensating. You may be prompted more often. This is a sign of care, not error. Expect normal operations to resume by 3 o'clock. The console posted it across pilot channels and the public board. The apology prompt added a single sentence. We are listening harder, so you don't have to shout. The temperature of the room dropped by a degree only people who work nights can feel. A pilot came in hot voice, prickly, patience low. I've flown these lanes 20 years, they said. I don't need a screen telling me to breathe. Vera didn't flinch. Understood, she said. Tonight the screen is reminding itself, not you. We'll be through this by 3. Do you want to see the log? The pilot's anger had nowhere to stick. It slid off a wall that had transparency written on it. No, they said, sighing. I want a sandwich. Kai pointed them to a vending machine that had learned to stock something edible since the protocol started secretly improving unrelated parts of the world by raising expectations. Sira used the lull to test a hypothesis. The Payne's apology templates could also de-escalate operator stress. They added a quiet mode that, when enabled, slowed the interface's own prompts by a half beat during heavy traffic and empathy for humans, not just ships. Kith watched the change like a conductor listening for the tempo that holds a room together. This feels like a kind voice, they said. Vera added it to the annex with a note. Safety is not only physics, it is also tone. At 2:20, the antenna technicians signaled completion. Cadence detection smoothed. Error rates slipped back into their new, lower normal. The apology prompt thanked users for patience without pretending the inconvenience was a gift. The board posted closure with the same public tone as the notice. The storm that wasn't a storm dissipated because it had been named and narrated before it found a story to exploit. Near shift's end, the executive from the corporate block returned, alone this time, armor dented by observation. They stood at the threshold a moment, then crossed into the circle where people had been doing the work. I read your repository, they said, words choosing humility for once. It is hard to argue with logs. Vera nodded, not triumphal. Logs are how we remember to be brave next time. The executive's mouth twitched into almost a smile. We are considering a public contribution. Our legal will hate it. Sira, dry as late-night humor. Tell legal we'll put their names in the credits. The crisis board stayed quiet. The queue moved like a sentence with good verbs. A small group gathered around the traveling rig for an impromptu cookbook session. Operators trading recipes for edge cases, translating tricks into steps, turning gut feel into shared know-how. Vera watched cards appear on the lessons board, named the uncertainty early. Public is faster than panic. T is a tool. The last one made Kith's loops arrange into delighted, a pattern that had become a shared joke with the weight of a promise. When the shift turned, Vera packed the tote. The book core pulsed once, as if to say a bibliographic amen. She thought of the auction again pocket change for a misfiled object, and of how many misfiled people had walked into this room and found their names added to a protocol that would outlive their shift and maybe their gout. She placed a fresh copy of the protocol on the public board and wrote at the bottom in plain ink, if this helps, add your name. If it fails, add your fix. If it saves a breath, tell someone who thinks open is a theory. It is not. It is a practice. The city rotated toward morning. The library's night crew would be shelving returns. The artisan quarters instruments would be cooling from performance. The residential ring would be waking into breakfast. The Starport, less a machine than a choir now, would keep singing the apology that made room for difference without mistaking deference for safety. Vera closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them on a room that had learned to be better at the speed of togetherness. It was enough, and tomorrow there would be more. The colloquium hall at North Arches University filled the way a careful argument does layer by layer, with people who intended to listen as hard as they spoke. A banner read, Public Protocols and Civic Infrastructure. Vera sat at a long table beside Kith and Sarah, flanked by a procurement lead in a quiet suit and a law professor who enjoyed questions that arrived as if late to a party of left having started the dance. On the podium, a live feed from the Starport's operations gallery displayed the dual tempo dashboard, apology prompts, and version history, scrolling like a lineage. Vera opened with a story, no slides, no jargon. The last daughter of Thomas, a family counting breaths, a pain that learned to bow at 2 tempos because people decided dignity belonged in the instruction set. Then she walked the room from mystery to protocol. Listen first, capture. Buffer as a ritual pause. Echo not guess. Apology as a design pattern rather than a PR reflex. She explained dimensional frequency. Plainly rate space bends under signal load and how the legacy cadence sagged like a full shelf until a bracket made it safe. The room did the thing rooms do when metaphors finally land. They breathed together as if agreement had a tempo. Kith followed, their voice measured but carrying warmth that instruments learn only by playing with others. They described anxiety loops as a tool and a vulnerability. How lists can keep a person if a person forgets why the list exists, and how the protocol let their loops become alignment instead of a cage. We taught our tools to apologize, they said, pausing between words like stepping stones. It taught us to listen without fear. Double quotes. A murmur moved through the auditorium that wasn't skepticism, wasn't awe, it was recognition. Sarah took the technical flank with the calm of someone who likes wrenches and logs equally. They diagrammed the pain patch, dynamic buffer keyed to measured cadence, apology templates parametric across species tone naps, transparency toggles to show buffer timing so rumor has less room to feed. They credited names from operations and custodial, then said the line that turned shoulders toward the future. Breaths are a better KPI. The procurement lead blinked, then nodded, as if a budget could learn to count what matters, because the room insisted. Questions came. The law professor asked about liability and open contributions. Logs? Vera answered. Attribution, versioning. If it breaks, we fix it in the light, with receipts. Procurement asked about drift. Maintenance. Sarah replied. Scheduled reviews? Public tests. Drift is when nothing is written down. This is a river with banks. A student asked who gets credit when a janitor's midnight insight becomes doctrine. The janitor, Kith said, and the room laughed in the kind way that says, this time we will not forget. Midway through, the feed from operations flickered an alert, not a crisis. A live test, a neighboring port, implementing V1.1. The hall watched as a lying new tag tried to bluff. The pane apologized, mirrored, bridged, and then yielded to hands for the true corruption case. Throughput held. The protocol traveled. The law professor leaned into the mic. This, they said, is what jurisprudence looks like when written by people who touch the machine. The procurement lead added, and by people the machine touches. A dignitary from the neighboring port stood at a floor, mic with the posture of someone used to being recorded. We will adopt the protocol publicly, they announced. We will contribute our improvements. We will not require fees for safety use. This time the room did applaud, not because applause fixes anything, but because it reinforces the muscle that does. After the panel, in the corridor where good ideas decide whether to survive, conversations braided. A union rep asked Sarah for the traveling rig schedule. A policy student asked Kith how to design apology prompts that don't feel like theater to species allergic to shame. A child there with a parent who refused to choose between caregiving and citizenship pointed at the live feed and said, that looks like a book that makes shelves. Vera knelt. It is, she said, and the shelves are people. Back at the port, the artisan quarter sent a request. Could the apology prompt adopt quiet mode during performances to reduce alert fatigue for operators who wanted to half listen to music without losing focus? Vera smiled. Humans multitask poorly. Let's help them choose one good thing at a time. Sierra dialed in a softer visual cadence. Kith tagged the change, as kind voice in loud room. Evening brought the festival's second night, and with it a visitor. Vera had half expected the executive from the corporate block without entourage, looking less like armor and more like someone who had seen the minutes of a meeting that changed their mind. We posted our contribution, they said, almost sheepish. Apology templates for 2 dialects your map didn't cover. Credits given. Vera checked the repository on a side panel. There it was, a pull request with clean diffs and names spelled right. Welcome, she said, to the bibliography. Night thickened into the kind of quiet that rooms earn by doing honest work. The operations gallery felt like a chapter near the end of a book that doesn't want to end, the part where people keep showing up to say one more helpful thing, because leaving would feel like interrupting a good sentence. The queue flowed. The Pain bowed and apologized when appropriate. The apology did not wear out. It wore in, like a path. A freighter pinged with a delay and a note. Captain's daughter aboard. First time off-world. Nervous. No crisis. Just a chance to be better. The apology prompt, now smarter in its kindness, added a line. We will go slow enough for first times to feel like beginnings, not tests. The berth welcomed them. A young voice crackled. Thank you. And somewhere a parent decided not to lecture fate tonight. The vendor's taller rep returned with a printed statement and a pen that had signed stranger compromises. Final press release, they said. It credited the repository, named the people, spelled open, without asterisks. It avoided the words partnership and leadership in favor of participation and contribution. Sierra read it, then nodded. This won't embarrass anyone in the morning, they said, which is a better metric than reach. In a lull, Vera and Kith stood by the glass, looking out over the berths. We started at an auction, Vera said. Pocket change for a misfiled thing. Kith inclined their head. We are often misfiled, they answered. The humor soft, the truth not. Today we wrote labels. Together double quotes. Vera touched the tote where the book core rested and taught the shelf to bend in the right place. They held a final training of the night. Small but resonant. 3 new hires, 1 veteran who'd never been trained because people once assumed learning by yelling was culture. The traveling rig word. Vera walked them through steps without hurry, naming each part with dignity. Listen, buffer, echo, bridge, apologize, handoff, log. She added the sub-rituals people had invented and she'd collected. Reading the room before reading the pain. Pouring tea before pouring blame. Pinning credits before pushing aversion. The veteran's hands steadied. The new hires' questions sharpened. Doing it right had become attractive. Close to shift change, a message from the library. A package had arrived addressed to the librarians of the gates. Inside, a carefully wrapped relic, an old analog dial from a defunct traffic system labeled in neat hand. For the shelf that bends, Vera placed it on the operations console for a minute like a candle, then moved it to the lessons board where it hung above. Breath is a metric, like a punctuation mark that smiles. The neighboring port pinged in with their first public patch, a tweak for high RF days in industrial zones. Credits to a welder who had noticed a pattern in failures that an analyst had missed because analysts don't stand next to welders enough. The repository accepted the contribution. The public board displayed the merge with names. The welder's crew made loud jokes on channel, which is how pride hides when it's shy. At 3:40, a minor scare, a cargo shell with an old dialect tried to handshake with a misconfigured private pane in a contractor's bay. The dual-tempo pane refused to be gaslit. It apologized to the ship, escalated to human, and flagged the contractor for a fix. The supervisor, now fluent in process, issued a calm directive. We do not route safety through private gates at midnight. The contractor grumbled, then complied. The room did not harden into victory. It softened into policy. As dawn ghosted the commercial wing, Vera wrote an epilogue into the log, not a flourish. A note for whoever would read it next and feel less alone. We found value in what had been discarded. We made a method from a mystery. We shared it in public so it could outgrow us. The protocol did not make us heroes. It made us neighbors. If you inherit this, inherit the habit. Tell the truth in steps. Name the people. Apologize like you mean to get better. Kith read over her shoulder and added a line in their precise cadence. We dash, bowed dash, twice dash, and dash, did dash, not dash, break, dot, double quotes. They closed the room without closing its lights to night settings. Consoles resting, the pain on quiet watch. People drifted toward breakfast and sleep and early trams. Syrah paused at the door. I used to think the best code was the kind no one saw, they said. Now I think the best code is the kind a janitor can fix at 3 in the morning. Vera answered, then right for janitors. Kith lifted their cup. To ritual, they said again, and the room, mostly empty now, echoed anyway. Outside, the city's first buses hissed awake. The library's custodians would be mopping a floor that demanded a gentleness machines should learn. The artisan quarters musicians would be sleeping on hands that smelled like rosin and metal. The Starport's berths would be taking slow breaths with ships that had learned a new way to say hello. In Vera's tote, the book core pulsed once, then settled, a good tool content to become an artifact, a misfiled thing refiled into meaning. And on the public board, a small, stubborn sentence remained pinned with tape that had learned to hold. Use this, teach this, change this, credit everyone. If you must choose, choose breath.